honestly, walking outside my house this morning, the drastic change between yesterday and today is quite phenomenal.
Yeah, it's been pretty up and down here, -7s. And on that fantastic bombshell, hello and welcome to episode 1 of season 2 of the Action Popcast for the episode known as Slapped. Kymgonic, how was your Christmas? How was it all? Did you have a great time? Did Santa bring you everything you wanted?
Yeah, Christmas was good. Christmas was quiet. Just not very many of us, but it was nice. It was nice to get a little break. And yes, and I believe that there were presents under the tree for my dad from Rudolph, and we had from Prancer and Vixen and a couple of the other reindeer, as well as Santa. So yeah, it was good. How was yours?
Mine was good, man. I got the usual stuff like smellies and a bottle of rum from my mother, which I'm due to finish this evening, and just general stuff. You know, Christmas is the time of year that I restock my stock. Christmas is the time of year that I restock my socks, and I basically fill up on Lynx body spray. That's what everyone gives me. I don't tend to get cups or anything like that on mugs. I know someone got you a mug and you were a little bit ungrateful because you already had too many mugs, but never mind.
To which my brother gave me another mug at Christmas. Although saying that, he did get me a really cool gift. It's like a little squishy, but you can colour them in. So it's a colouring in squishy.
Well, like a stress ball.
Yeah, but it's like a penguin, so you can get different Christmas characters and they're like squishy foam, but you get to colour them in. So it comes with a white squishy penguin and then like felt tip pens for me to colour it in.
Wow, that's pretty wicked. I'm not too sure if the ungratefulness was more from you about the present I sent you, or if it was from your dad, to be fair. So I'm not taking it personally.
It's from my dad more than me.
And in a roundabout way, giving us a link to a receptacle which holds liquid that you can drink, tonight's podcast is all about something you can drink. And it's about Orange Tango and its guerrilla advertising campaign in the 90's. Kim, were you aware of this? You're a little bit younger than me. Did you live through any of this? Did any of this before researching jump out at you?
I sort of remember the adverts, but not really, because it wasn't really a thing up here. It wasn't really a thing in Scotland because, well, I was very young in the 90's, but then my brother would have been at school during the time, and I even asked him about it, and it wasn't a done thing. So it clearly just wasn't as big a thing with us as it was with you guys.
So shall I show you the advert, Kim?
Yeah, go for it.
Hello, Tony. I think we might use a video replay here.
Super, Ralph. Let's do that.
Oh, yes, we could be in for a quintessential tango taste sensation here. Why, yes, Tony, let's look again.
Yes, Ralph. The big orange fella ran in from the left, and he gives him a good old slapping.
It just illustrates the bite and buzz of real oranges in tango.
Yes, Ralph. Super taste sensation, smashing drink, lovely.
You know when you've been tangoed.
So that was the famous advert. The advert we got the show title from, Slapped. Having seen that, looking back on it now in 2024, does it make any sense to you why people lost their minds about this? Why this caused such an uproar, so much upset? The media really reported on this like it was a terrible thing. Because if it doesn't make any sense to you, because obviously you're a little bit younger than me, I'm going to take you through why, but can you see why this would have been offensive to people at the time?
No. No, not really. But then I was 2 years old. I was 2 years old when this came out, so
I was a little bit older. Okay, so this advert is famously called the Orange Man advert, and it debuted in 1992. Tango had a You've Been Tangoed advertising campaign, which ran from 92 to 96. And this was actually an advert that was put together by an advertising company called HHCL. I'm going to have to refer to my notes now just to give you the full name of what it was formerly. So formerly, HHCL were Howell, Henry, Caldecott, Lurie and Partners. Thankfully, they shortened it down, so it's going to make the podcast a little bit easier. And yeah, so that advert, you've got a man drinking Orange Tango, and then commentators Hugh Dennis, who is an English actor and comedian. He's known for things such as the show Outnumbered. He was on Mock the Week. And Ray Wilkins, an English football player who also became a football coach, commentating. They're commentating on a man drinking a can of Orange Tango. They then do a rewind, and a man painted all in orange, kind of looking a bit like a Buddha, runs up to the guy, slaps him across the cheeks, and that is to show the slap, the bite, the sting that you get when you drink real oranges and Orange Tango. This advert caused so much controversy because it created a craze in playgrounds in the UK where kids were running up to each other and double slapping each other on the cheeks and shouting, "You've been tangoed." I know, kids copy what they see, right? Now, there is a misconception that this advert was actually banned. This advert was never banned. It was actually voluntarily withdrawn by a chap called Rupert Howell, who worked for Tango. And it's because he received a call from a surgeon who phoned him up just to say, "Look, your advert, I've had a kid in today with a burst eardrum, and he's told me that it happened because someone tangoed him, i.e. ran up to him, slapped him, and it burst his eardrum." So that's why the advert was actually withdrawn. It was never withdrawn because it was banned. It was withdrawn because someone at Tango thought, "Oh no, that's not good. We can't have people's having their eardrums pop." So they re-edited the advert. One version was the orange man running up to him, much the same, and giving him a kiss. And another version, the man just straight up runs away, the guy who would have had the kiss or the slap. But that didn't stop Tango. You see, with all the negative press, their sales started to jump up. Their sales were becoming phenomenal. In fact, by 1994, 2 years into the campaign, they'd doubled their sales, which is quite remarkable. But interestingly enough, when I was at school, we actually got a letter home from school, which would have been around 92, about kids slapping each other in the playground. This is how big this was. This was in all the papers. Schools were worried. Parents were up in arms. Our little darlings are running around slapping each other. You've got this stuff on daytime TV between kids shows and whatnot. So with that background, Kim, does it make a bit more sense to you now as to why this caused such an uproar?
Yeah, although to the point that it actually got a child injuring themselves for them to actually do something about it. However, though, do you know what, though? It literally just reminds me of... You're saying that people were going around doing this and saying you've been tangled. It's the same as like what people do now with rickrolling people. It's the same thing, just less violence.
Absolutely. And there has been people who have linked... Do you remember the thing in the... Was it around the noughties, 2010s, the happy slapping craze, where kids were going around slapping random people in the face and recording it and sending it round?
Oh.
That was quite a big thing. No, you just must be much more civilised in Scotland than we are in England, because this was quite a big problem we had down here.
Yeah, but that's the same as the fact you have to remember Scotland and England have two different TV stations, so I think from what I can gather, we didn't get the same amount of Tango adverts. You guys did, which is maybe why it wasn't a problem, or it wasn't as big a thing. It's maybe why, like, my family members and my family members' friends don't really remember it. So I think that might have had something to do.
No, and that makes perfect sense. That does make perfect sense, because back in the 90s, I know we had Sky Television, but that wasn't a commonplace thing when I was growing up. I was one of the few people I knew who had Sky. So your only real channels down here would have been ITV and Channel 4. So, of course, if you've got, what did you have? Was it STV in Scotland, you said?
Yeah, it's STV.
Yeah, so that makes sense as to why it wouldn't have been seen as often in Scotland and perhaps narrowed it down. But yeah, as I was saying, Happy Slapping is linked to that. And interestingly, in the year 2000, the Channel 4 and Sunday Times poll actually voted this as the best advert ever. And it's won multiple polls over the years of people rating this as one of the best adverts ever. But that's one advert from the campaign, because as I said, this advert ran, well, not this advert in one format or another, edited and changed, ran from 92 to 96, but that didn't stop Tango doing other things. There were various other adverts. The next advert that Tango did, I believe it's the next advert, and this was the one advert I couldn't find the exact year for. I believe it would have been 92 or 93. There was a lady stood on a platform in a train station. She's there, and as she takes a sip, a man in an orange suit runs out of nowhere and screams in her ear, "Oranges!" Scares the crap out of her. Then they do a replay of it. Again, something else I can remember. I can remember when I was at school being told not to scream oranges in each other's ears. I don't ever remember getting a letter home about that one, but that was something which we were told not to do. But Tango just could not stop with what they were doing. I think they picked up on the fact that all publicity is good publicity. Their sales were going up, as I've already said. By 1994, their sales had doubled. So just to give you a rundown of other adverts that they had a pensioner walking up to a man drinking a can of Tango. She walks up to him. She's in a black dress with a hat on, looking quite weird with a giant balloon. She walks up to him and, yeah, he's drinking his can of Tango, and next thing you know, it looks like she's going to pop the balloon, and this lady actually explodes. She just explodes and again scares the man. And believe it or not, this advert actually caused the charity Age Concern to complain because they said that it was offensive to old people. Now, you have seen this advert, Kim, I know. Can you in any way see why this advert was deemed as offensive to old people? Because I watched it and I'm like, I really don't get what they were going at with this. I don't understand it one little bit. What's your take on that?
No, I don't really see how it's offensive. We've got worse stuff on TV now than we did than what that is. So I'm not really understanding why it was offensive. But you know what? It just takes a few people to jump on the bandwagon to decide something's offensive.
It almost feels like because Tango had got into the media and there was a little bit of an uproar about the slapped advert, that was it. It was kind of open season on Tango. Tango were obviously loving it because every time they got in the media or someone complained or some charity kicked off about something, their sales would go up. So these adverts they were paying for were doing what they wanted. It was selling more product. Now, the thing I don't know, I think Tango always knew these adverts would perhaps be a little bit controversial and push the envelope a little bit. But do you think that they knew just how much sort of frenzy this was going to create? Do you think that this was their tactic all along, that they wanted to create frenzy and cause people to be upset and complain? Or do you think this is just a happy for them? Do you think this is just something that happened because it happened naturally and it was just a bonus for Tango? That's one thing I can't really work out if it was.
No, I think it was definitely intentional after the success of the Orange Man. That helped with their sales and stuff. I'm pretty sure they used that and just built on it. They probably just didn't make it as extreme maybe as the slapping because of stuff that had happened, but they just utilised it to make other adverts that were just a bit weird.
And all those adverts you watched, there's a slide you had up a minute ago, Kim, if you could bring it up again. There was a legless man. He was orange. Now, he's on the slide there. He's holding the can of Tango in his legs. He had a kilt on, no legs, and he's bouncing down the street. But before he comes bounding down the street with no legs, sort of walking along on his hands, an orange foot, a severed orange foot, just sort of flies and hits this chap in the back who's drinking a can of Tango. And he turns around to see this grotesque blue afroed, Scottish dressed looking man coming towards him. And you think to yourself, bloody hell, that's a little bit scary. Looking back now, I mean, it's not scary as unfair to say you look at that and think, oh, well, that's scary. Looking back now, I can see perhaps why people, well, not adults, but why children would have potentially found that scary. As I say, I couldn't find anything as to if people complained about that advert, but I think that's what Tango were doing. I think because the slap itself was shocking, but obviously that could incite violence. But if you've got a grotesque, deranged-looking man bounding down the street, I think they were looking for shock in other directions. What did you think of that advert, Kim?
Well, I'm offended because they've made him Scottish. So that kind of says that he's meant to be Scottish. Also, if you notice, why does he have a blue afro and orange skin? Does it remind you of any other drink? Was my first thoughts when I saw the advert, and I was like, oh, great, you're using Irn Bru colours and you've put him in a kilt. That's good.
Well, you know what? I've never looked at it like that before. Maybe it was a dig at Irn Bru. I've never actually looked at it with those eyes before. You made me see something that maybe isn't there or maybe is there, because let's face it, these companies do tend to have pissing competitions with each other to see who's the best and who can have the most market share. So do you think that's what they did? Do you think that is the reason they did that? Because as I say, it's the first time I've even thought on that.
I don't know. It was just the first thing that comes to my mind. It's just a bit weird that they chose to put a blue afro on him and give him a kilt, and it was just the fact that somebody that comes from here, knowing that Irn Bru is really the drink that's for us up here, and those are the colours, that's kind of the first thought that my mind goes to. But I don't remember it as an advert on my TV, though it maybe was not a dig because it wasn't really shown for us. It's kind of difficult. You don't know whether it's a term of endearment or if it is a dig. It could be one or the other.
As I say, I'd never thought on that before, but knowing the sort of things Tango were pulling and the sort of things they were doing, it wouldn't actually surprise me. So well spotted by yourself there. Didn't occur to me. We can't give an answer either way. I guess we'll never know. But actually, now you've said it, I think that's probably exactly what they were doing. It wouldn't surprise me one little bit for them to have a dig at Irn Bru. On this slide, there is a chap and he's got a blue denim coat on and he's there holding that can of Tango. Now, this advert, I think people just call it headless now. This advert itself actually did cause a little bit more uproar because in this advert, there's a chap, he's at a football game, he's having the time of life with his friends, he takes a sip of Tango, he's in a football stadium, suddenly the football stadium's empty and it's just him stood there. And the picture next to him of the lady with the orange hat and white hair, he just sees her on the pitch, sort of laughing and cackling and coming towards him. And then there's a bold chap who almost looks a bit like Uncle Fester from the Addams Family appear to the side of him. And the man, you can see he's scared and he takes a sip of Tango and his head pops off. And then he appears back in the football stadium. This advert had multiple people phoning up and complaining about it, and it was actually deemed too scary to be played in the daytime and between adverts of children's shows. So again, Tango, they did their job. Because at this point, I think they were going for maximum shock. Having watched this advert, I can see why a kid would have found that scary back in the day. I didn't find it scary, but then I was a little hooligan. You've obviously watched this advert. What are your thoughts on it? Do you think it was justified to pull it from between children's show ads? Do you think it was shocking enough? Did it meet that threshold to be pulled?
I do think it was worth pulling because I didn't find the sort of zombie-looking type Addams Family guy scary, but I found the woman with like the corkscrew and the orange part, that was a little bit creepy. And as like not a big fan of horror films now anyway, and I do think having that on daytime TV with kids and stuff now, just because the camera angles were flicking back and forth as well, I could see why kids would maybe not quite like it in the same way or find that scary. So I do think they were kind of right. It's not an advert that I would have. It's not an advert I would have paid attention to. It would probably just have creeped me out and I'd be like, not interested in that.
This advert in question came out in 1994, so I think at this point they were pretty well versed in what created shock. At this point, I know I posed that question earlier, but at this point, to me, it's clear that Tango are going fully into this. They want their adverts to create media frenzy, because why wouldn't you? If you had a brand of something, if you were selling something, and every time you released something and people got up in arms about it, your sales went up, you would, wouldn't you? You would continue this trend, because ultimately they're a business and businesses are there to make money. There's other things that Tango have done. I am going to go into another thing that they did, a campaign I loved, and it is on this slide. But before I go into that, just little things. Later down the line, they had an advert where they had a donkey wearing a hat, the sort of thing you buy if you went on holiday to Blackpool, walk into a kitchen and kick a man in the face because he's eating sprouts. And they almost parody their own advert. Rather than when you've been tangoed, it's when you've had sprouts. It's got the same commentators on there. It's got Hugh Dennis again. It's got Ray Wilkins, who I didn't say earlier, sadly he actually passed away in 2018. And then it just ends on, you've had sprouts, a load of sprouts fall on the screen. So I think Tango were also pretty good at taking the piss out of themselves, to be honest. Because there's no, in that advert, other than the style of the advert and the when, there was nothing really in it to talk about their own brand. So they'd obviously, at this point, I feel at this point, this campaign had become so well recognised that people knew it was a Tango advert.
Not when it came out, because for me, I was sitting there going, have they just made that a Christmas advert?
Well, I know that it came out in 1995. Sadly, I couldn't find the exact time of when it came out, and from memory, there doesn't appear to be anything in the advert other than the sprouts to show it being Christmas. But that's a good point. Perhaps it was around the December time. Perhaps it was that. I mean, you've seen the advert yourself. Was there anything in the advert other than the sprouts that jumped at you that made you think Christmas?
No, because he was just sort of sitting having dinner and stuff at the time. But the only time I could think is I suppose not every Christmas advert needs to be physical Christmas, but it was just sort of in my head. I just sort of assumed that because it was about sprouts, did it come out sort of maybe October, November, December time, as a parody of a Christmas advert for Tango.
So again, it's their reasons I don't know. Unfortunately, I didn't find anything to point out as to exactly what that advert was. However, there was one advert they did which I absolutely loved as a kid. And if I'm to bring the slide up again, now in the corner there where you see that telephone number, you can see a little orange man, and he looks slightly like Morph, the old claymation character. This advert in itself was bizarre. You had a bunch of people in a room, all sort of dressed very hippie-ish, jumping up and down, and they're all chanting Gotan, because this is the name of this dog. Now, when you chant Gotan, Gotan, go tango, the faster you say it, they're basically just saying tango, tango, tango. Now, purely for the sake of research for this podcast, I found I had to go out and buy myself one. I had one as a kid. Being the little ruffian I was, why are you shaking your head at me, Kim?
Because it's just typical, isn't it? If it's available to you, you will buy it.
Well, look, I'm going to say now, I'll go into this a little bit more in a minute. I'm going to take Gotan out of his box, right? So in this advert, you've got a man at the front of everyone. He's holding Gotan, or the Tango doll, as it's more commonly known. And they're all chanting Gotan, 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 right? And he's pouring Orange Tango on him. So this is clearly a voodoo doll. Up to a scene of a man in a changing room. He's trying on clothes he's going to buy. Next thing you know, this crazy big-ass Viking-esque character comes marching into his changing room and, with an orange fish, sort of slaps him all over the face with it. Advert finishes with a shot that we'd showed in that slide with how to buy your own tango doll. And if you phoned up for this, it was I remember it very well because I had one. I remember begging my parents to let me phone up this line because the way you paid for it was that your telephone bill got charged $2.99. Now, I know you were shaking your head at me, Kim, but I felt this was an essential purchase for research sake for this podcast. And I felt if I was going to talk about him, I should probably have him. Now, I even went to the extent of finding one that came with the original box because, for the sake of completion, and it's still got the Royal Mail Tunbridge on it, 466. It's got Tango all over the box. And I remember getting this through the post when I was a kid. You have no idea how excited I was. Unfortunately, this was $2.99 back in the day. And I'm ashamed to say that I quite literally paid 10 times the price to get this today. This was hard to find, man. This cost me 30 quid. So he looks a bit like a dog's shoe. I feel they missed an opportunity because he doesn't squeak. I think he should have had a squeaker, don't you, Kim?
Yeah, but the noise he's making is a bit weird. So could we not squeeze him anymore, maybe?
Oh, what, the air rushing out
Very
of it?
odd.
Wow.
That's just a very odd noise. It would have been better if his eyes popped out. His eyes pop out.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing special about him. I mean, it's quite cool. He's got Tango stamped on his arse. So he's a Tango doll, and he's got like these weird little stitches. He's just a solid rubber figure, and they've made it look like it's a sewn together doll.
Did you ever look at who I think they remind me of the characters in that film 9? Did you ever look at it?
No, I didn't. You're going to have to expand on that, sorry. No, I didn't, sorry, no.
So there's basically a film called 9, and it's kind of an apocalyptic film, but there's these little characters, but they're made by an inventor. But they've all got like a mechanical structure, but it looks like they're kind of covered in some sort of material if it's not like a sack material. So it kind of reminds me of them slightly, but a more apocalyptic version. If anybody
more disturbing looking
remembers it, some of them look a little bit friendlier because they're all numbered. They're all made of different bits and pieces. So, but it does remind me of that movie.
Okay. You send me a link, I will pop it in the show notes. And just a reminder while we're here, show notes for this episode will be in the description of the YouTube video. So if you're listening to this on your preferred podcast provider, please do check out the YouTube channel. You can pop on and see our faces and see all the slides and that we're referencing. And you can check out the show notes. However, yeah. So this Gotan, essentially, it's a £30 dog toy. Pretty robust. So he's not going to break. My son does want to steal him. And I'm now, do you know what? That could not have been a worse aimed throw. That's literally just fallen down the back of my chest of drawers. That was an exceptional throw.
Good luck to you getting that back.
Trying to be cool and clever. Oh man, do you know it's got right? So I'm not sat in a studio here. A little bit. If you're watching this on YouTube, behind me here, I'm sat on the end of my bed. I don't have a studio or anything. This is literally the end of my bed. I set up all of this every time we want to record a podcast. Right? There's all my toys behind me because I'm a man baby. People would say, but yeah, no. In trying to be cool, what I've just done is I've just thrown Gotan to prove how robust he is. He's fallen behind the chest of drawers, and on the top of that chest of drawers is about 30 bottles of perfume because my wife's mad on perfume. So I've now got to, at the end of this podcast, do you know what? I think Goan can just live behind the chest of drawers until we move. That's what I think can happen. That way Jax can't steal him. I just can't. I cannot be asked for that. Goan, you enjoy the dust, lad. So yeah, but he was one of my favourite memories of Tango as a kid. You don't fancy going and getting yourself one of those then, Kim?
Oh, it's 30 quid anyway.
See, that's my dedication to this podcast. I said to Carla, she was like, do you need that? I said, look, I had one as a kid and I need one for the podcast. She's like, why do you need one? You can bring a slide up. And I could bring a slide up, but, you know, we can think of that as a little impromptu product review that I just did. And yeah, so that's why I got Goan, not because I am a child.
Just
anyway.
keep giving yourself excuses for buying it. Keep on. You're trying. None of them are valid yet, but keep trying.
Well, look, I looked through the list of other shows we've got coming up this year, and I'm definitely going to have to buy some stuff. I've already mentioned this to Carla. She's like, you do not need to buy this stuff. I'm like, look, you know, for the sake of researching, I feel I need this stuff. So, you know, I'll spend my pocket money on what I want. Thank you very much. It's very similar conversation. Well, look, we're not monetized in any way, shape, or form. We don't get nothing for this. Tango, if you're watching and you have any in stock, could you send me a spare one so I haven't got to fish it out from behind the chest of drawers? That'd be great. The conversation I had about Carla with this when I found it on eBay was very similar to the conversation I had with my parents back in 95. You don't need that. It's rubbish, but I really want it. But you don't need it. But I want it. And I'd add justified reason for the podcast this time. I didn't have that excuse in 95. I think I just broke them down eventually. Before we move on too much more, I haven't gone over every advert that Tango did. There was another one where a guy runs out dressed like Napoleon with a big rubber glove on. He was on the slide earlier and he just sort of rubs it on the guy's face. One of the more disturbing adverts from 1997, there was an advert of a guy, he's on a stage and they've got a bunch of clowns there and they're all giving the clowns a measure of Orange Tango. They want to retrain them to make them useful to society as, I believe, estate agents. Bottom left-hand corner, there's two clown-like looking people. Now, albeit, this is a scoop on the front of a big, like, Arctic truck. And there's clowns jumping in front of it. And I don't know, right? So, all right, it's a scoop and it looks like it's padded and they're all on it having a laugh. But they're literally showing clowns jumping in front of, like, 10-ton vehicles. So we can't get away with a slap or an old pensioner exploding, even though it wasn't a gory explosion, it was a flash, but we can totally get away with clowns throwing themselves in front of vehicles. Do you see, Kim, there, why I'm like, why do some things get through and some things don't? Because to me, that was one of the more disturbing ones. It really was.
Yeah. But I feel like the clown, and to be fair, I don't like clowns, so I'm quite glad that they're jumping in front of like big heavy vehicles. But I suppose if you really want to look at... Yeah, I don't like clowns, but I suppose if you look at it though, you could possibly get away with it because you could say it's kind of slapstick humour. Because it's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous that it wouldn't happen.
Well, yeah, no, I see that point, but it just amazes me because for all the flack Tango got, whether it was accidental, the first advert or not that we've already discussed going this route, but obviously they're going down the path of let's shock people. Interestingly, there was a follow-up advert to this where the person who made the advert is being punished because the Tango exec's saying to them, well, this advert didn't do very well. And she leads him into a cupboard. You don't really see much of what happens. And then he comes out all shocked looking. So Tango were quite good at taking the mick out of themselves if an advert failed, because they also released a line called Still Tango. And the way they went about this was slightly different. They released an advert for Still Tango, and then they released adverts saying that Still Tango was a fake product, that it wasn't an official Tango product. So they were telling the public that their own product wasn't one of their official products, so basically don't buy it. So this, and there was another advert following up to that where, due to the withdrawal of the item and then apparently reinstating it a couple of years later, this guy is being punished for causing that to happen. And so there's two execs in an office, two older chaps, and it's very formal looking. And the older exec walks up to the man, bends over his lap, he gets an orange slipper and he starts smacking him on the ass going, "You won't do this again, will you?" Like spanking him like he's a child. And the man gets up and is like, "Nope, I won't."
The advert's really creepy. Like, I was quite uncomfortable watching it, to be fair.
What, the guy being slapped on the arse with a slipper?
Yeah, just because it was so monotoned
It
as
wasn't
well. And I'm
paired
like,
up.
no. Yeah, I know, but I'm like, no, this is very uncomfortable.
There have been various flavours of Tango over the year. They did have Lemon Tango. To be fair, the adverts on that weren't that exciting. It was just sort of like very cult-like and people drinking Lemon Tango. I didn't draw much from it that I thought was worth really diving into on this podcast, but it existed. They used the similar sort of tactics of advertising it, but it didn't really stand out. But now a flavour they did introduce that really stood out, the Apple Tango adverts. What did you think of those adverts when you watched them? Without giving too much away, what was your initial thoughts?
Cringe.
Cringe is a really good word to sum them up. So I'm going to bring up yet another slide. The premise of these adverts, they've got Apple Tango, and there was a few adverts, but they sort of went down the S&M route. In one advert, there's a bloke sat at home. It looks like he's poorly and off from work. And when his wife goes to work, he gets off the sofa, rummages through a box, pulls out like a black leotard, almost sort of gimp suit looking, dresses up in it, and he's speaking to a can of Tango about her big juicy apples, rolling around on the floor excited. And then the wife walks in and catches him, and he decides that rather than apologising, he's proud. No, I'm proud of this. It's like, what is even going on? Then the advert finishes with something like, "If Apple Seduction's taking over your life, call this number." So Tango actually set up a hotline you could phone, and albeit it's a comedy, it's a joke. But then in another advert, there's a chap going on about big juicy apples, and he's running around a supermarket looking for Apple Tango, dressed in a silver coat, as you can see on the slide, a chef's hat and socks. And it's just the image of the can led on the cushion, talking in a seductive voice to these people, encouraging them to do stuff. One advert I couldn't fit any pictures on the side of. There was a guy in it, and he's in an office, and it looks like he's in a lawyer's office with his wife next to him, and it's like he's having a dirty conversation, like one of those old 90s sex lines that you would see advertised of an evening on Channel 4 or something. And it's just the whole big juicy apples and the hotline. So to say they were cringe, I think that's fair, but I do actually think they were funny. Could you see any of the humour in it, Kim? I thought it was funny.
I feel like it's now kind of ruined the fact that I like Apple Tango, because it's kind of ruined it, because those were not adverts that I saw. I personally don't find them funny, but then I struggle to find adverts funny and stuff now. But I can sort of see why people would maybe think they're a little bit extreme, and I could also see why people find them a bit funny. But I think they were definitely trying to rock. Like, I wouldn't say they were trying to rock the boat, but I think they were finding out where their boundary was. They were trying to find out where the line was. So they're now pushing it to kind of go into sort of erotica and innuendo. So the idea that there is something more without it actually being something more.
Because let's be fair, kids wouldn't have known what the hell was going on. But I can imagine the odd awkward conversation with a parent. Mummy, Daddy, what's he doing? Oh, well, I imagine I was just being silly. He's just being silly. But if you've got kids who are already mimicking Tango adverts, I guess the last thing you want is your kid pretending to mimic one of these adverts. What a weird thing. I don't think it's extreme, but if you're going to say Tango adverts are extreme, I think this is more extreme than slapping some geezer around the face on the street. I think that this is more of a... This was certainly done to create shock. I did briefly cover the fact that there was a Tango helpline you could phone, an Apple Tango helpline. Now, there was something else in the past, and I believe I tried to research this and find exact dates. Now, some of the information on this stuff is actually quite hard to find. It's almost like it's been lost in time. You can get certain dates, but exactly when things happen can be a bit out of sync. Tango did have a hotline that you could actually phone up. Anyway, there were adverts for it. I think it was around 50p or something like that. I couldn't find the price for it. And you could phone up. And I did this a couple of times as a kid. So I had a friend at school called Ben, and his parents had split up. And whenever he would stay at his dad's, which was just around the corner from me, we'd go around there to play, and we could just run riot. His dad would just let us do whatever we wanted, even at like that young age. Just go mad, you know. And I can remember we used to phone this hotline up, and it would play a really weird message about Tango and whatnot, and then you'd listen to it, and at the end you had the opportunity to leave a voicemail yourself that the people at Tango could listen to. What the hell kind of weird stuff we said as young kids on this line, I do not remember. But this was a very real thing, and the only thing I thought about when reflecting on this or looking back or remembering it was, I wonder if they ever actually listened to the messages that people left. And if they did listen to those messages, did they ever draw inspiration for weirdness from them? I don't know. Unfortunately, I wanted to bring it up, but I couldn't find an awful lot on it. I can only really say that it existed. I phoned it. Used to think it was funny, but I was a child. I'm still essentially a child in an adult's body, but, you know, I'd say it before you say it anyway.
Wasn't going to say anything.
That was... I saw the thing is, I can see you on cam, and I can see you roll your eyes. I can see it.
I know my face gives me away every time.
Tell you what, you must be great at work in meetings. If you don't like something, people must pick up in an instant. Your face literally says straight away what's going on. There's no hiding what you think.
That's why I'm not on camera quite a lot in my meetings. We have avatars now, so I get to be an avatar.
Oh, I bet that saves some awkwardness. Now, Kim, we are rolling through the subjects now. We're getting through it quite well. Now, in 1996, Tango did an advert. It's known as the St. George advert. Had a chap called Ray Gardner in it. And premise of it is he's working for Tango. He's an exec. He's in the office, and he receives a letter from a French exchange student called Sebastian Lloyd. And this letter goes on to explain how he didn't like the new blackcurrant Tango flavour. So what this leads to is Ray walking out of the office, undressing, stripping down, and marching till eventually he's on the White Cliffs of Dover in a boxing ring with hundreds of people around cheering him, jet planes flying overhead, and he's there challenging Sebastian Lloyd to a fight in this ring, and he challenges all of France. In fact, he ends up challenging the whole world over Tango, and people not liking blackcurrant Tango. He's going to fight the world for it. And this advert was the most expensive advert Tango ever made. It was £400,000 from the information I could find. It was only played on Channel 4 during TFI. TFI Friday used to be a show on Channel 4 that Chris Evans used to host. was on a Friday night, hence TFI Friday. They would play it between the ad breaks, and it was also played in cinemas. This advert was one of their biggest successes ever. Ray Gardner won an award for Best Actor in TV Commercials. They won many industry awards in the advertising world for this advert. And it went down an absolute storm. I have to say, I've watched the advert several times. I remember the advert. I do think it is amusing. I don't get why it won the awards though, mate.
I've not actually seen this advert. It wasn't in any YouTube videos or anything like that. But then you say it's kind of a St. George advert, and that's a very English thing. So it wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't something that's played up my neck of the woods.
No, that's fine. I mean, if you haven't seen, how I described the advert, the music on it was a song called "Don't You Want Me" by Felix. And the result of them using this song in the advert meant that it recharted again. My notes here say it recharted at number 17 in the UK singles chart. And they actually ended up releasing this song with Blackcurrant Tango branding on it. So, bit of luck for the band there. But this advert was just, they loved it. It went down an absolute storm. It was... And it is quite crazy. It's literally a guy screaming at Europe, screaming at the world that I'll fight you if you don't like our product. It's nuts. It's crazy. There will be a link to all these adverts in the show notes, so we just wouldn't have time to play all the adverts. So please do check them out after the show if you want to see these adverts. I would check them out. Make your own mind up on if you find them as funny as I found. Some of them are funny, some of them are shocking. But yeah, this advert, this is the advert
it doesn't sound that thrilling. It just isn't, like, from what you've described, I don't understand. Even from the description of it, I don't understand why that would win awards. Really?
This is the thing. See, now I've watched all these adverts multiple times, prepping for this, familiarise. I mean, I remembered them from a kid, but you got to refresh yourself when you're going to do a show on it. And I have to say, every time I watch this advert, when something comes up, you're like, it's probably only a minute long. But you know when you're like, oh, I've got to sit through this again. Got to sit through this again.
Yeah, it feels like a long minute.
Yeah, it felt a lot longer than what... Like the first time, it was like, it was quite amusing. Like some guy stripping out of his suit and down, and he's got boxing shorts underneath, and all the people follow. It's like a scene in a playground. You know when you were at school and people went fight, and all of a sudden 2 or 3 people just amassed a massive crowd and people are all following them. That's exactly the vibe it gives. And it's nuts and it's crazy, and the jet planes flying over and everything. A lot of money on it, but perhaps like I said, I found it funny the first time, but it really lost its charm after that. Fair play for winning all the awards and everything. It obviously stood out to people in the industry and whatnot, but yeah, sorry, Tango, I don't get it on that one. Going into another advert. Now, I say that Tango, this campaign ran from 92 to 96. Now, Tango was still making adverts. They still do make adverts. They've always tried to keep with the sort of crazy thing since. There was an advert in 1998 that was actually banned over concerns of bullying, and it starred James Cordon. Now, James Cordon, I'm sure most of you will know, for us English people listening, Gavin and Stacey played Smithy. That's the thing he's most famous for here. In America, I believe he hosted The Late Late Show. But yeah, so this advert, it's James Cordon. He's young in it. He's a well-set chap, and he's sat in his house, and he's got a bunch of ginger-haired men all around him with these like little horns, and everything James Cordon says they repeat, and they just keep repeating it until James Cordon is pleading at the end for shops to stock Orange Tango. They withdrew it because there were fears of bullying. They thought people would bully people, would follow them round, would mimic them. They were concerned because James Cordon is, dare I say it, an overweight chap, that it encourage people, given the past of Tango adverts and people mimicking stuff to bully people. And ultimately, it was all to advertise the Tango horn. Now, the Tango horn was like you know those fold-up cups you get that slide out on a base? Yeah, those cups. It sort of looked like that. It was a little horn you spoke into. It was a mini megaphone. That was the thing. It was $2.99 again, same as Gotan. But they were concerned that that would cause bullying. Any views on that one, Kim? Do you think that was a justified withdrawal of an advert?
Yeah, I could maybe see where they're coming from now. I maybe wouldn't have been able to see it at the time, but I could definitely see it now. I think I can definitely sympathise with why they maybe decided it was a good idea to sort of remove it. So for the backlash.
Now, I was looking back on it now as an adult, I was an overweight child, and bullying is real. It does happen. So, yeah, I don't think it's a shocking advert, but I think my thoughts on that are people looked at this and said, you know what, there are kids copying everything that's going on in these Tango adverts, and we just can't have this because bullying's one of the nastiest things that can happen. So I don't think Tango would have thought that this advert would have caused bullying, though. But I do think maybe that was one of the more sensible ones where they decided we can't really have this. But yeah, it was interesting to see where James Cordon, one of his early roles. Obviously, he's gone on to have massive success since. Just a couple of more bits to run through for Tango before we wrap this up. Now, in 2002, they decided to relaunch the whole You've Been Tango campaign again. Now, as I say, initially it ran 92 to 96. Yes, there was that advert we just spoke about in 98 that falls outside of it, but it's still sort of Tango-esque. But 2002, they came back, and HHCL, the original company, they actually ended their working relationship with Tango. They got another company in called Chai to head up the campaign. I've looked through the adverts. They've got that feel, but they don't quite capture, for me, what the HHCL adverts did. I think it was very much of its time. However, in 2004, there was an advert, and it's just referred to as pipes. On all the research I did, I'm going to bring up another slide. Now, on this slide here, you can see a chap. He's wrapped up in a carpet, loaded with oranges, on top of concrete pipes. I do know from research that those pipes were actually made out of foam. They're on top of a hill on what looks to be farmland. Now, there's a goat eating grass, and as he eats, he pulls the rope away, or he chews through the rope. I can't quite remember. My apologies. As I say, you can see a link to the advert in the show notes. The pipes go rolling down the hill. He goes rolling down. He smashes into a tree at the bottom. All the oranges explode. He gets that hit of orange that Tango liked to advertise, the hit of orange. Then all the pipes, one by one afterwards, smash into him. This advert was straight up withdrawn. Tango argued, this isn't a realistic setting. It's not on a building site. How on earth are kids going to recreate this? This is unfair. But they just straight up withdrew it. So, yep, 2004, Tango hit all the papers again. Controversy, as we know with Tango. Having watched the advert, I think withdrawing it was probably a little bit harsh. Maybe move it to later at night, but I don't see as kids would have copied that. I think that was a massive exaggeration. Again, as ever with all these adverts, what's your thoughts on that, Kim? Do you think that was it was justified to withdraw that advert, or do you think they were just playing it uber safe?
No, I actually disagree with you. Like, I do think kids would have copied it in some shape or form, maybe not exact. Like, it doesn't really matter whether it's on a building site or not. I'm not necessarily saying young kids, but definitely teenagers and stuff like that. And obviously back in the, like, kids like 14, 15 and stuff, they go to parks and they do drink and all this type of stuff. And one of them just has to have, like, oh, let's do the pipe tango advert and something like that. And they could have quite easily been stupid especially since you had things like Jackass and stuff that were still around, that were coming around, and slapstick stuff. So to be honest, I disagree. I think they were right to withdraw it, because kids copy the most ridiculous stuff, and we even see it today that kids copy the most ridiculous stuff, from eating washing, like the little washing liquid capsules and things like that. That was a trend, that was a thing. They had to put warnings on all of that now. So to be honest, I think they were probably right in doing so. It's just we didn't have loads of social media at the time, so you just didn't see it. Kids weren't filming themselves doing it. But I think had it been later, they definitely would have. So I think it's justified that they removed it.
I think you raised a valid point. That's something, again, I hadn't thought of it. This was very much around the Jackass era of things. I guess the way I looked at it was probably the way Tango looked at it was, you're never going to find pipes like that on the top of a hill. There's nothing dafter than kids when they've had a bit of cider when they're teenagers down the park. And let's face it, humans are incredible at managing to do things that you think aren't possible. So you know what, actually, yeah, for once I'm gonna change my opinion on that and say, you know what, Kim, you've raised a really good point, and I
think it's because I know that they're trying to say, oh, there's not concrete pipes, and I'm like, but it doesn't have to be a concrete pipe. Like, they could find anything, people dump stuff. Like, they could have just used something different and still caused like harm. And the point is if they'd managed to do something, somebody could have died from whatever they were doing or whatever they're playing. So I think in this case, I don't think they were playing overly safe. I think they were being sensible in the fact that kids do it. Kids are silly like that, especially in the nicest way possible. Boys in particular, teenage boys, are that stupid and think that they're invincible. So I think they were right in pulling it personally.
40-year-old men think they're bloody invincible when they've had a beer, mate. Just saying. Excuse me. Well done. You got me to look at that differently. So yeah. You make a really valid point there. I'm gonna let you have that point. But the last thing I want to go over, and I want to add this in, because I know you looked at a few of them, and you know them because you're Scottish and it's your favourite drink ever. And I'm not saying that to be rude. You genuinely do love Irn Bru. I know you do. It doesn't feel right to wrap this up without looking. I know this is a podcast about Tango and their guerrilla style advertising campaign. They were the punk rock of advertising in their day. But in the noughties, Irn Bru, and I came across this while researching, released their own adverts. And Kim being Scottish and not having as much or hardly any memory of this Tango stuff, Kim, have at it. Here's your chance to talk about Irn Bru and the things they did in the noughties, which I feel are massively, 100%, without a doubt in my mind, inspired by what Tango did in the 90s. Have at it, Kim.
So I think what Irn Bru did is, I definitely think they took inspiration and stuff from the Tango adverts. However, I think Irn Bru took it a little bit further, especially taking sort of what they thought from, say, the Apple Tango adverts. Because even if I just bring up sort of one slide, like, these are billboards where they've actually put certain wording on it. So it's like, I'm into Irn Bru and hardcore prawn sites. So it's a massive innuendo, but it's the fact that wasn't even aired, that wasn't even really shown. And things like, when I'm a burger, I want to be washed down with Irn Bru with a picture of a cow. I've got friends who are vegans and vegetarians, but could you imagine if they put that out now, the backlash that they would get?
There's nothing better than Irn Bru after you've just been laid. I'm a child. That's the picture of that chick there, freshly hatched.
There's even one that's ones that say like, we'd go straight for Irn Bru, and that was shown once and then it wasn't shown again. And like, things like that, it just wouldn't be accepted now, even though like we know that they're tongue in cheek. So I think it's a different thing in society now. We find them as tongue in cheek sort of things, that it's not serious, it's just a bit of tongue in cheek fun. But obviously the way people are now. So I do think Irn Bru followed on from Tango, but I do think they pushed it ever so slightly further, considering the fact they had an advert with sort of Disney animation characters that walked with a really smiley, happy man into a butcher shop, and then they then become animated pieces of bacon and sausages and chicken drumsticks. Which, to be honest, the first time that I watched it, I was like, that's kind of brutal. But the only way they've not made it brutal is by making it a cartoon.
But I watched these adverts, and I used to be in the butchery trade, so I did find that one funny. I think the advert they did, which to me was so tango, it was completely tango, and it caused offence. There's a family round the piano singing. It's in black and white. It looks like it's the 50s maybe, and they're singing, and it leads to the woman singing out loud, even though I used to be a man, even though I used to be a man. And all the family look at her. It's basically them singing, I love Irn Bru, she loves Irn Bru. And yeah, she goes on to say, even though I used to be a man. And in the last scene of the advert, she's there shaving. And I just thought that if you'd have changed the words to I love tango and I think you could have swapped the words out on that and made that a complete tango advert. That upset a lot of people, and I believe it was withdrawn.
So that one was withdrawn, but I'm just going to bring this one up because there's two more. So Phenomenal became Irn Bru's sort of signature line, that it's phenomenal. So there's one advert in particular, and it's streakers on a football pitch. So basically, there's a guy watching a football, and there's police and everything. He takes a sip of Irn Bru, and it's meant to be his sort of vision of all the taste that he's getting from Irn Bru, that all these streakers come out from the crowd to pounce on a policeman. And one guy sort of comes in, jumping over it, and you can hear the roar of the crowd and stuff, and they completely make the policeman start naked, and they skip off the pitch. And then you see the guy in the audience go, wow, that was great. Meaning like just the taste of Irn Bru. And it's really funny because the sort of music to this advert is, do you remember Animal from the Muppets going do 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 do?
Yep,
so
I remember.
They did that, but they went do 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 do. Phenomenal. To go with like Irn Bru's phenomenal was basically that. But they banned this advert because of the streaking.
No, I didn't see this one. I haven't seen this one. I missed it. Please tell me that they made a joke about a truncheon in it, because if they didn't, they missed an opportunity.
It was they didn't really make joke. There wasn't really any speaking in it. It was mainly just like the crowd and stuff.
Oh,
but it was just there were streakers and naked people and things like that were in it, that it ended up getting banned. And the other one was they brought out Fiery Irn Bru as a limited edition. And you can still see the adverts on YouTube, which we'll give you the links for. But I actually loved the advert because it was basically these elderly people telling stories, and then it was all about somebody had given them this Fiery Irn Bru to try, and then when they try it, they go, oh, and then they start a swear word, but they don't finish it because it flicks to the story of somebody else, and the other person happens to say a word that ends with the same wording as the start of the swear word, so it sounds as if it's a swear word, but it's not, because somebody else has done it. And it's really funny because it's very Scottish and it's very obvious, but they weren't even allowed to really show the advert because it was what was the wording that they used? It was too influential on the basis that kids would start swearing and doing stuff like that. But Fiery Irn Bru was only a limited edition, but you would just never be allowed those adverts. You just wouldn't be.
And the one I said about even though I used to be a man. Now, when I first saw that advert, nothing in my head triggered off about it offending people and stuff. I saw it now and I thought, oh yeah, you wouldn't get away with that now. But the everything's changed in the last 10, 15 years. We're a lot more aware of what causes offence. That said, I still don't believe for 1 minute, like these advertising companies, they know what they're doing and they are aware of things that can happen. So I don't think they would have ever put that advert out. Again, as I said, not thinking that there wouldn't be someone being offended. So that's the gamble you take. And look, it paid off for Tango massively. And it looks as though these risks have paid off for Irn Bru. I will say I agree with you. The Irn Bru adverts are more, they've taken it further, but they're sort of 10 years after the fact as well. I think they're brave for what they've done. I don't think, as you say, I don't think we'll get away with any of these adverts now. I think this age of adverts, this style of adverts is pretty much dead now. I've seen people, or heard people talk about adverts that they think are edgy in recent years, and it's, not really. Not by the standards of what we had.
I would say though, even though Irn Bru sort of came after the fact, Tango is now starting to copy Irn Bru now. So I do think they kind of bounce off each other. Irn Bru started coming out with adverts that are more like mini films, so they're like short films now. And they've definitely, it was sort of said in a couple of articles and some headlines that Tango are now following suit, especially since they've now come out with their dark berry flavour. And that advert that they've done is like a mini, it's like a short film or like a mini series that they've started creating in those adverts. So in fact, they followed suit. But it doesn't surprise me, considering the fact, it's just a little tidbit for people, that obviously Tango was owned by Britvic soft drinks at the time. Bar and Britvic were actually going to merge in 2012. They were going to create a new company, so they were actually going to be together. So Tango and Irn Bru would have been under the same name. Unfortunately, it was sort of abandoned in 2013 and they were kept separate. So it doesn't surprise me that they bounce off each other for different bits and pieces.
No, not at all. And it doesn't surprise me that Tango are now, it's gone full circle and Tango are taking inspiration from them. This is just the way things go. Always has been, always will be. Now, a question for you, Kim. We always finish these with a question, see if we can agree. So my question to you is, do you think that the guerrilla advertising tactics that Tango came up with, do they still have a presence in today's advertising landscape? And when thinking on that, also within today's social media style of advertising, I think they absolutely do. Do you agree?
I think the idea of the shock factor still has a presence in today's society, but not this shock factor with the offensive that they did. So I think adverts now are very much, they want a shock factor, but not so much of a shock factor that Ofcom ends up blowing up and they get so many complaints about it because it offends people. Whereas I don't think Tango had to worry about that so much back in the 90s. Whereas I do think companies have to worry about that now. So I do think they still want the shock value, but it's how do they get the shock value without being offensive to modern society?
Okay, so are we sort of agreed there or not? I can't work out if we're agreeing.
We're agreeing on the fact that the shock value that they brought has a presence, but not everything that they brought has a presence. So I would say part of what they brought still has a presence.
So sort of 50-50 on that. So
yeah.
Episode 1 of season 2, we've sort of have and sort of haven't agreed. But that's better than just completely agreeing or completely, that's fine. That's good. Well, Kim, thank you for joining me. Well, joining me, it's half your blooming podcast. Thank you for coming along. Thank you for sticking with it. And now we've kicked off season 2. We have got other subjects in the works and we will be back soon. If you want to listen to the show in podcast format, just audio format, we're available on pretty much every podcasting service now. So pick your preferred provider and have a listen. If you are listening in that format and you want to check us out on YouTube, please do. The channel is called Action Popcast. We have rebranded. It's just Action Popcast now. We can be found on Twitter, Instagram. Kim is now running a Facebook page for us. There will be an email for us in the show notes. with the show notes, so you can contact the show if you want to. You can leave us a comment here. Tell us about your favourite adverts and whatnot. I'm Nick APD. All these places I've just mentioned are where you can find me. Kim, I'm going to ask if people wanted to find you or check you out, where could they do that?
So again, you can, well, I'm running the APC Facebook page, so you can technically find me on the Facebook page now. But otherwise, I'm on Instagram under Kymgonic. But again, like I say in every single show, and I'm going to continue to say even in season 2, I am not that bothered about followers. So if you want to, feel free. If you don't, that's fine. If you like guinea pigs, follow the pig files because it's more interesting than my one.
Brilliant. I've got to ask every show, and I always know what you're going to say. As I say, all my socials are the socials for the channel for the podcast, so you can literally contact me on any of those. I hope you've all enjoyed the show. I've enjoyed researching this one. I hope you've had fun, Kim. We have got more stuff coming soon. So, with that said, thank you so much for joining us. Again, thank you for continuing to stick with us. Kim, thank you as ever for all your hard work. It's always appreciated. And we will see you on the next one. Bye, guys.
Bye.